Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. It's Patrick here. Our webinar is going to run for approximately 15 minutes with an opportunity for questions at the end. I'm just waiting. We've had a bit of a schedule challenge for our Forstrong expert. So I'm going to talk for a little bit about what we're hoping to do with these webinars going forward. Basically, the objective here is I'm trying to make sure that we communicate with you, the clients, the investment component and the money managers. That component can be quite complex, and I'm finding, and certainly when the times are volatile, it's helpful for them to explain to us what they're doing. So basically, that's how this started, the idea. It'll probably expand, though, as we get better at it, into some other timely topics of discussion, and I'm always interested in hearing from you about what kind of financial planning or investment topics you'd want to cover. We're just sort of building a schedule out for this year, so appreciate your patience again with this. It's sort of our first time hosting our own, and I'm just gonna basically start, and hopefully our guests will show up here while we're talking. Yeah, I'm Patrick, as we know, and joining us today, momentarily we hope, will be Krystian Urbanski. He's a Senior VP Associate Portfolio Manager with Forstrong Global. I'm just going to move the slides along here. Hopefully I've got the screen working. Oh, now it's working. Okay, so I'm still meandering along. Anne's giving me the thumbs up, so that must be a sign this thing hasn't totally blown up. Appreciate your patience again. I'll probably be saying that quite a few times. A story I've used with many of you over the decades we've worked together. When investing for a financial plan, the goal really is to catch as many good-sized fish as we can. This often requires us to leave the shelter of the familiar harbor to trawl for the best opportunities, and sometimes it can get rough and wet in the deep water, but that is where the best potential is. The harbor offers us little opportunities, a bit of shelter, and the beach, although dry, doesn't provide much in the nets to meet our long-term requirements. So fishing we go with Forstrong in this case to help us ensure we weather the storms and catch as much as we can. In recent months, the investment markets have been quite volatile. We see the headlines and we wonder really what's happening. It's quite confusing. We've been through challenging cycles before. In the past, we've had 2001, remember the Nortel times and the dot-com boom and bust. 2008, a bit of a banking crisis there, affected certainly the North American markets and with contagion over into European markets as well. We had a bit of a blip in 2011. I remember in May 2011 there was the banking crisis, and then 2014. But in all those cases, we weathered those storms and benefited by keeping our heads and working through to good results. So is this another cycle? And Krystian just walked in here, so it's working out perfectly. We're just hoping that you'll share with us what sort of Forstrong's thinking and what's happening in general, so we can have a little more confidence in what's happening. So thanks for joining.
Thanks, Patrick. My apologies. That's a little miscommunication in terms of when it was to begin. But thank you for inviting us here today. It's great to be here. Yeah, so obviously 2018 was a challenging market globally, and as Patrick mentioned, unfortunately this is not anything new. The markets once in a while do become challenging. 2018 was challenging for a number of reasons. One, obviously the trade wars. In fact, 2018 altogether wasn't that bad. It was the last quarter that was the most challenging. And in that quarter, the U.S. market in just the last 3 months of the year went down -9 in Canadian dollar terms, -9%. And in fact, in U.S. dollars, more, because the U.S. dollar went up 5%. The TSX was actually down -10%. So obviously a very, very challenging quarter. That being said, in order to have a decent return, we need to, obviously based on your unique risk and your personal situation and your financial plan, a lot of times we do need to look beyond GICs and saving accounts, because obviously those will not accommodate what we're looking for in terms of our required need for retirement. So we do have to look at securities and the markets, and once in a while stuff like this happens. But if you're patient, we can weather the storm. And the theme is here is, fishing in deep waters, and sometimes we have to go to the global deep waters to actually get the performance that we need. The biggest problem in terms of performance also is the portfolio inception points. Unfortunately, we can't guarantee when you go in as a client that once you start, the market's going to go up. That's a problem that...
Wait, that's what I thought we were going to do.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's not the case. And the best minds in the world can never time the market. And a lot of people have tried, but the best course for that is just stay patient, stay invested, and so forth. And in the next couple of slides, I'll tell you why. Finally, the best defense for any type of a market like this is having a balanced portfolio. All the things that we actually did at the end of last year, which is underweight U.S. markets, overweight emerging markets, is becoming fruitful right now. Emerging markets are outperforming U.S. markets. So what we're doing is working, but it sometimes takes time to develop. So let's continue to the next slide.
Okay. I think we will.
So just to in terms of what I want to share with you, the next slide is the consistency that Forstrong has performed at. There we go. Okay, so this looks very busy, but
yeah, there's a lot of numbers in this.
It's a lot of numbers for sure, but it's actually very simple. Okay. So if you look at the numbers on top, let's just pick year 2005. So the top line, you look at the number and year 2005. On the vertical line on the bottom, pick 2009. So that's 2005,
yeah,
and go down to 2009.
Yeah.
And that number is 4.90%, right there, exactly. So this means that if you invested in December 31st, 2005, and stayed invested to December 31st, 2009, you'd have 4.9% per year on a compounded basis.
Okay.
Now let's pick another year, just as an example. Let's pick a negative year. So 2007. There you go, minus 4.21, 2007. Yep. Okay. Let's stay invested to 2012.
Okay, so we go right through the worst of 2008.
Correct.
The big downturn, and go down, slow recovery through and on in past 2000 to 2012. Okay.
It's exactly. So the whole point is, if you are patient and if your time frame is obviously more than 3 to 5 years, as you can see, there's in longer periods, meaning 2-3 years, there's not even a negative number. There's a couple negative numbers in 2007, 2008, but as Patrick mentioned, those are the biggest financial crises in the past 50, 60 years. So, that being said, this is the consistency that we have, and this is a Forstrong global balanced portfolio. And in fact, all our portfolios essentially react the same over long term.
So just quickly go back one, so a little longer term horizon. Just not, we haven't been with you that long in this respect, but if we go back to say 2003, then so basically somebody who's been in this particular portfolio, which a lot of our clients are, 2003. Basically, we go through downturns in 2008, but if we hang in there, you're saying that if we were even by 2014, we were averaging between 2003 and 2014, we were averaging
7.23 per year,
which that's actually fairly good.
Well, if you follow the rule of 72, which is basically divide 72 by the number and it takes you, so for example, 72 divided by 10, if you make 10% per year, that would double your money in 7.2 years. So at 7.23, roughly, quick math, you're doubling your money in 10 years. So at this point, you double your money, which essentially, with the volatility in this portfolio, which is very reasonable, it's a balanced portfolio, and doing very well in 2008, in fact, 2011, 2015, and in fact, even last year. Once again, if you were in this portfolio from January till December, the entire year, you wouldn't be doing that bad. You're still negative, but it's only minor. Now, depending on when you get in, if you get in closer to last quarter, the number's a little different, obviously a little lower.
Yeah, and I see, so 2008, just as context here, we've got, so you're telling me basically in 2008 calendar year, the balanced portfolio is basically a minus 0.64. To give some idea to clients about that in context, what was the TSX peak to valley in there? It was down like, it was not quite half, but
it's close. It was 44%.
Yeah, so it was down. The Toronto Stock Exchange, and of course we're not investing just there, was down, just under half. So the declines. This gives you some idea why a balanced portfolio, I think.
Correct, and that's a good point. But take it a step further. In 2008, a standard balanced portfolio on average went down from 26 to 29%.
Right.
So that's a balanced portfolio, just like this one. And as you can see, this is down, say, -1 for simplicity. So it's saving substantial amount of downside. And let's be honest, not only money, it's the actual stress that we feel when our money goes down. We all know we're all on the same team. We try to make money for our clients because we're in our portfolios as well. And we feel the same way as our clients when our portfolios go down. But once again, we understand that it's patience. And it's the plan that you set with your financial advisor. If we follow the plan and we align our plans and our time frame, historically and statistically, as you can see on the screen, we have done very well. And just to mention, this piece is available or will be available as a takeaway. So I will send this to Patrick, and he can distribute this to anybody who's interested. And you can see that once you have some more time to look at this, how convincing this actually is statistically.
So that's good. Now we're going to just go to, I guess, the next slide. Is that what you?
Yes, please. So the next slide, just to continue, is again to show the consistency of these portfolios. And this one's a little different in a sense that it's going to show you the 3-year annual numbers depending on when you get in. So once we move to the slides.
Yeah, and again, technical problem. We should probably fire the technician. Yeah, I can't get this to move. Oh, well, working on it.
Okay, no, we'll take our time. But once again, let's visit this slide again. Just if you notice, in 2011 was actually a bad year. If you can scroll down, there's a slide right there.
Oh, okay. Hey, look at that.
Okay, sorry. This is so this is why we're consistent.
Yeah, so what's this? Yeah, so you tied into my fishing thing, but
yes.
In the global space, what is happening?
Okay, so this is an interesting slide, and this actually takes this is a real slide and comes from the Canadian pension plan. And in fact, in 2000, a typical pension would have 81% allocation in Canada, and only 18.3% in a global allocation. Fast forward 16 years later, the same portfolio is at 80.9% global versus 19.1 Canada. So what, as the industry calls this, the smart money is already investing globally. The global market is huge compared to Canada, or should I say the Canadian market is very small compared to the global market. And it ranges anywhere from 3 to 4% depending on the time frame. But the fact is that if your market is so small, why are most Canadians investing mostly in Canada, right? So the pension understands that there's a lot of opportunities, not only for growth, but for reduction of risk in the global space. And this is where we come in with our Forstrong global balanced portfolio. On average, we're actually a bit higher, about 90% in global, about 4 or 5% in Canada, and 5% in cash. So I just want to show you that we're actually basing this not only on our obviously expertise, the global expertise, but the fact is that the pensions are doing this. And I want to mention something very interesting. We actually manage one large pension. We manage a number of them, but the largest one is the Concordia University pension. A part of their pension is $68 billion. So $68 million is a lot of money. They're actually investing in the Forstrong Global Balanced Portfolio. Okay, and that's interesting because you can have access to the same portfolio for as little as $1,000 through Wealthsimple and Patrick. And so, which institution can you go to and say for a fact that I have the same portfolio for my $10,000 TFSA as a $68 million pension for a large university in Canada? And when we make a trade for the pension, Concordia, guess what? We're making the same trade for you. So it's exactly the same portfolio. And this is what separates our company versus other companies in the business. We wanted to bring this type of an institutional portfolio to every single Canadian, and the ability to enter this portfolio at as little as $1,000.
I see. So the move from the 2000 to 2016, actually recently there's been some coverage, media coverage even about the Canada Pension Plan and their increased focus to global.
Correct.
And I think the Quebec Pension Plan as well, they've got some coverage just recently too, where they're expanding over, say, 2023 to, say, 2030, that they're going to be significantly biased towards a global exposure. Correct. And I think in both their cases, they're talking about a risk management.
And that's a fact. It's statistically proven that the more global versus Canada you have, the better your portfolio in terms of risk and reward. So we have those pieces on our website. In fact, if you're interested, you can find that, or Patrick can provide that to you as well.
So do you want me to just change the slide?
Let's go move over.
Sure. Oh, okay. This one, yeah. I know you sent this one to me, and I said, "Oh, what are we talking about here?"
Okay, this is actually a very simple slide. Once again, it looks complicated, but once again, it shows you the consistency of this portfolio. And this is, for information like this, it's easy to do it from a set period to a set period. So this is once again from the December 31st to December 31st. So if you look at down on the bottom, the first bar, which just says December 06.
Oh yeah, way over here.
There, okay. So this basically means that if you invested in December 03 when this portfolio started, so the actual portfolio started in 2003, and by December 06 you would have 7.37% per year on a compounded basis, so annualized. If you invested, let's look at December 12, just as an example.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so if you started, go back 3 years. So if you actually got into this portfolio in December 09, by December 12, you would have 6.38%. So bottom line is, any year that you got into this portfolio since inception of this portfolio, you'd be positive.
On a 3-year basis.
On a 3-year basis.
Yeah, which then I guess plays to the what I'll call the longer term focus. A lot of our clients, I mean, we want to have wins every day, but really what we're doing is investing for a longer term retirement.
Of course.
Which could be a number of decades, so we really do need to think.
Exactly. See, a lot of people even assume that once you retire, hit 65, for example, your portfolio stops. It doesn't. It can continue for another 20, 30 years. So even at, say, 55, your time horizon is not necessarily 10 years. It could be 30 years.
Yeah, we're actually in the planning world. We're now running into this, and many of you have heard me talk about that. Longevity risk. When the Canada Pension Plan got started, the average Canadian male life expectancy was 68, and you started when you're 65. That has changed drastically to the point now where we're using actuarial calculations out to the late 80s. And so that's a problem. Well, it can be a problem. Some people are actually going to be retired longer than they worked.
It's true. And that's the biggest problem that is faced by financial planners like yourself, because there's a balance. Obviously, we need to control the volatility, because the emotions are, dealing with money is very difficult. It's very personal. So, our new partnership with Wealthsimple and your new partnership with Wealthsimple is tremendous. It's a great way. This is the future. But the problem with that is that every time you log on, you see that number on top.
Yeah, you could look at that thing
every single day.
Every single day, open the hood and look. That can be challenging.
Correct. And I always say, especially in the down market or volatile market, just don't look at it. Take a small vacation from it for maybe a couple months, and then go back, because sometimes it's just not worth your stress. And if you speak to your financial advisor, Patrick, obviously you can shed some light on the time frame that you guys are investing for. So there's a lot of more variables than just a monthly or even a quarterly drop in the marketplace. And once again, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fool. Nobody likes to see a negative in their portfolio. I don't either. That's just a fact of life. But at the same time, if we're patient, historically, as you can see, these are audited numbers, by the way. I just showed you that if you put in money in 3 years, this portfolio has never lost money going forward.
Okay.
And even in 2008, 2009, as you can see, that once again, one of the worst corrections in history, you would still be positive ending 09 and 08.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to jump to this. So basically, oh, geez. I'm also experimenting with graphics. Okay, so maybe I should keep my day job, but this is basically, Krystian, we were just saying, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are, there's sort of three sort of scenarios. We are out fishing. We do have to get to the deep water to get the best fish. So we basically have hired Forstrong to keep an eye on what we're doing, so we get the best opportunities. That's all. And we'll continue to monitor that. Now, what I thought I'd do, I think we're running a little bit behind, but I'm going to open up just for a few questions, if we've got a few minutes. Now, I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong on this, basically on the webinar screen, the attendees have a spot they can click to ask questions. Okay, so that's cool. And I'm going to just jump.
So you can, actually, it's on the bottom, you should see a chat function.
Oh, yeah.
You can ask questions through that.
And I can open it so I can see the questions. Oh, that's very handy. Okay, so while we're waiting for a few questions, I did have a few. Actually, earlier client who wasn't able to attend today did ask a couple of interesting ones, and I'm going to just grab one here for you. So he had actually a good question, and these are more about what's going on right now. I gather he's been reading some of your materials, and it says, what do you mean when you say the sell-off has provided for a re-entry point? What do you? And I think he's talking about just timing.
Just the market, of course. So sell-off, obviously, in the U.S., for example, and I'll just use U.S. and emerging market as an example, but in the U.S., the actual stocks were very expensive. In fact, they're more expensive prior to the global financial crisis, because the run-up has been so great over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Emerging market has become expensive as well, and because of the trade situation, the emerging market was a pretty big sell-off. That's one of the reasons, as I mentioned earlier, that affected our portfolios. Now the prices are becoming more value-oriented. Mm-hmm. This is a good time to enter into the market, and in fact, we are, I would say, overweighting equities, overweighting stocks versus fixed income versus bonds, because we believe that now it's a fair value to jump back into the marketplace.
Okay, and maybe you want to talk just a bit to it. I've had a couple clients ask me this question before, and I sort of describe what an emerging market really is. And people say, what is that? What is that? Imagine, Africa or something like that. And I thought, well, maybe you could just describe quickly what basically an emerging market is, and why that would perhaps be a thing that would be something we want to focus on.
Okay, so great question. So emerging markets are basically countries that are not part of the G7, G8, like Canada and so forth. They're still emerging in terms of the economy, the growth. A good example would be India, Russia, Brazil, Argentina, China. So all these are emerging markets. Now China is probably a bad example now because it's a huge economy, but it's still considered an emerging market. And some of you may have noticed the BRIC, so Brazil, Russia, India, and China. That was a theme 10 years ago, maybe. There's also some emerging markets in Africa, but Africa, a lot of countries are known as the frontier markets, so that's even before the emerging markets. There's also emerging markets in Europe, Eastern Europe, in fact, Romania, Poland. That would be an emerging market. So,
Okay.
good political situation, for example, could be a good, as Poland's becoming more of a manufacturing hub for Asian companies. It's cheaper for them to actually open factories in Poland than.
Yeah, doesn't Volkswagen do a fair bit of manufacturing in Poland?
Exactly, and Romania as well. So a lot of South Korean countries are going to Eastern Europe and building manufacturing facilities because it's easier than the transportation. So all in situations like this, there's opportunities, and it's actually a very difficult market to navigate because there is a lot of variables. But once again, Forstrong has global experience since 2001. In fact, our founder, Wilfred Hahn, was head of RBC Global Asset Management, and he was doing investing for pensions and so forth. And it was always a diversified portfolio, including emerging markets. So we're well versed in emerging markets, and we believe that the growth going forward is going to come from emerging markets. Hence, we actually are overweight emerging markets.
Oh, okay. There's a question, of course, and I was waiting for some client to mention it, but I can see it here.
Okay.
With the U.S., and they're talking, I'll call it geopolitical risk. I'll add that in. The question wasn't that, but with the new president, DT, they call him, should we or are we diverting our investments to other countries? So I guess that's a geopolitical risk thing.
So we have diverted from U.S. That's part of the reason why our portfolio was affected, because we believe that there was a lot of risk in the U.S. It was expensive, and we diverted from the U.S. and went more to the emerging market. And the opposite actually happened at that time. U.S. went up, emerging market went down. The opposite is happening now. So we were a bit early, maybe 4 to 6 months early. But that's, you can never time it perfectly. But that being said, we still believe that the risk on the street, people are saying there might be a recession in the U.S. We at Forstrong actually don't believe that. We believe that it's going to be a slowdown. But that's actually pretty good for the markets because it creates some more stability. There's a lot of risks in the world right now. It's, the trade tension still, right? U.S. and China.
Canada caught in the middle.
Correct. What if the U.S. Does not approve or puts tariffs on Europe with the vehicle imports? Brexit could be an issue as well. So there's always challenges. But to take a step back, I was flying to Calgary to do a presentation a couple years ago, actually about 5 years ago, and a lady beside me said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I work for an investment company." And she said to me, "Well, what do you think of Greece? If you guys remember the European debt crisis?" I said, "Well, not much." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Because there's always a Greece." My whole point is there's always something happening in the world, and there always will be. And the fact is, we have to. This is why this job is so difficult. We have to navigate all these pieces of information and try to come up with a strategy that is defensive, but at the same time makes money. Because ultimately, let's be honest, we're here to make money for everybody, right?
That's right. That's right. So I think that probably is about it. I don't see any other questions, so let me just move on. And oh, nice little picture. There we are, deep water.
Perfect.
So yeah, basically what's going to happen is, thank you for participating, everybody, by the way. And we are, I'm planning to have a replay version available in a few days. And again, as I said at the beginning, our plan here is to continue using these webinars as a timely planning and investment communication tool. And we are looking for topics sort of going forward into the year. So please send us comments, suggestions. Appreciate your input. And thank you, Krystian, for joining me today.
Oh, Patrick, thank you. And my apologies for being late.
Well, you're right on time.
But yeah, I look forward to participating in the future. And if there's any questions, obviously Patrick can answer them and we can help him assist you in any way as well.
Great. And thank you.